Welcome back to the Life of Tashmia. I'm Tash. Today I'm doing a solo episode that is really close to my heart, and it's something that I've wanted to do for a while, and it's probably the first time I've actually felt ready. So hopefully I can get through this. And I wanted to start the discussion about the journey I had through my mother's passing. So I know I mentioned in the first episode of this series that we started this year of filming when I did a bit of a life update that a few years ago my mum was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. It was already in a very progressive stage that had also spread to her liver and her bones. So I'm going to go into a bit of that story and talk about the wonderful woman that was my mum and the journey that I had to go through with that. So 4 years ago, it would have been now, my mum was actually suffering from what doctors thought was reflux. She was having a lot of pain in her chest, and they put her on medication for reflux. But the problem wasn't getting any better, and it was getting worse. I must admit, looking back now, I actually noticed my mum was starting to lose a bit of weight, which is never a really good sign. So I had to really persist with her, you need to keep hassling these doctors that this isn't right. You're still in so much pain and discomfort. There's something not right. So it took quite a while to get my mum to find the right doctor, because they were kind of referring to people, I think they did some x-rays or things and nothing was really coming up. They just thought it was reflux. They did a heart scan. Again, that was fine. So they referred her to a gastroenterologist, and she finally was given a CT scan. And I guess when the doctor gets your results and they say bring a support person, at the time I didn't really think much of it, but it's never a good sign looking back. So I had my daughter at the time who was 3. She was with me because I had her at the time. And I went with my mum and they delivered the results to us. And my mum just grabbed my hand and mouthed to me, "I'm so sorry." That was her first reaction, was to tell me how sorry she was. And I just remember looking over at my daughter on the floor playing. So it was a bit of shock. But my mum, just to give you an idea of who she was and what my relationship was with her, she was literally the most incredible mother. And I know everyone thinks they have the world's best mother. Well, not everyone, but some people who have had great parents. She really was. She was put on this earth to be a mother. And I have such a high respect for her as a woman as well. She was really my first role model of what a strong and empowered woman really was. She loved me and supported me through everything. She really prioritized travel since we were very young kids. I have a sister. And we learnt so much growing up from being exposed to the world and exposed to different ways of life. And that was such a gift and a blessing. I learnt way more from that than I ever did in school. She was raised in very conservative Australia, middle class, very smart. In her day, really the options for females was kind of secretary, teacher, or nurse. And so she went to uni and became a teacher. She did her economics degree and then her diploma in education. And I actually said if she'd probably was born another era a bit later on, she probably would have been running a bank. She was just incredibly intelligent. But she was a real mum, She really cared for us. She always worked even though she really didn't have to. She showed me that it was very important to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. That really got instilled from me at a young age that you never should rely on anyone, especially a man. You should have your own money and you should be working towards something no matter what. So we were very close, had a very close relationship. And while I knew the boundaries in our household and it was not a loose household whatsoever, I also was in a position, which I don't really know how she managed this, was if I was in trouble, I could call her. I had a lot of friends that could not call their parents when shit went down. I had no problem. If something went down, if shit went wrong, I would pick up the phone. I could call my mom. I knew I wasn't going to get a bollocking from it. I knew when she was disappointed and she didn't like things I did, but I could always to be honest with her. And I think that is such an important line to put as a parent with your children. And I pray one day I can do the same with my daughter. She accepted me as I am. She was quite different to me. As I said, she was very conservative, middle-class Australia upbringing. And, I grew up in quite a conservative area, definitely, private schools, suburbia living. But I was always a little bit different, I'd say. I had a very strong interest in towards sexuality and kinks and things like that from actually quite a young age. And my mom could not be more opposite to that. She'd been with one guy her whole life. And she often used to say to me, like, I don't understand how you came from me. But she never made me feel guilty. She never made me feel shame. She never made me feel bad about it. And I could tell her things that I'm sure lots of people wouldn't tell their mothers about myself. And she always embraced that wholeheartedly. And that's the only reason why I could be who I was meant to be in this life, is because I had someone who accepted it. So as I got older and I was about to have my daughter, I was looking for a house to live. We were living in the same suburb at this point of my life. And I'm a very big believer in the universe, but the house I found was basically across the road from my mother's. And so I moved in there and I saw my mum basically every single day. She raised my daughter with me. I was a co-parent from my daughter being 1, so a lot of the times I was a single mother, and the only reason I thought I could be a single mother is because my daughter had the most amazing mother also in my mum, and that's what made me think that I could really do it. So post the diagnosis, we were pretty much in shock. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer is something you don't really associate with someone who's a young 60, very healthy. She still worked, very social, very active, looked healthy to the point where her oncologist just couldn't believe she was a pancreatic cancer patient and did a biopsy test to see it wasn't another form of cancer, which was much more slow growing. And you could actually treat it and prolong the life quite considerably. So we had hoped that maybe that was the case. Unfortunately, it came back and it wasn't. She did actually have classic stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which had, as I said, had already spread. So that was really hard to accept that diagnosis. And I think at the time we put, this was just diagnosed and you kind of think you have a lot of time. I don't know why, but you think, well, the end is so far off. And in reality, it ended up only being 8-9 months until she actually passed from diagnosis. Interestingly, well, not interestingly, but I met my now husband a few weeks before my mum was diagnosed. And I know why that happened. It's because I was about to lose my rock that I've had my whole life, and I got my new one. So she started her treatment, which was obviously heavy chemo. It was COVID time, so it was not the easiest thing to manage because I wasn't allowed to go into with her where they had treatment, obviously, because cancer patients are obviously going to be they're more susceptible to catching things, so they want to keep bugs and people away. She was in a lot of pain, and my mom was actually really scared of pain meds. I didn't really understand why. She's like, I'm worried about being addicted to them. So you think, well, you've got stage 4 cancer, you know where this is going, like, who bloody cares? But she was very scared of pain medication. She was someone who never drank, never smoked, never did drugs. So this was completely out of her comfort zone. But it got to the point where every day she was crying in pain, and it's, for anyone that's cared for someone who's sick, it's someone they love, is very difficult to watch. So I asked to see her oncologist with her one week, and I came in and he's asking her, how are you going? She's like, oh yeah, I'm fine and everything. And I'm like, no, I'm here because she's not fine. I don't know what she's saying to you every week, but she's in pain every day. And he was like, well, this is a very different story to what I've been getting. So she wasn't even being honest with her doctor about it. So I kind of had to come in and just say, you need to embrace this. Obviously, she could get access to things like marijuana, but she just didn't want to have any of it. So it's difficult, and she started treatment, but she actually didn't react very well to the treatment and the chemo. She ended up going in and out of hospital a lot, getting very sick. At the time, I thought I was handling it well. Looking back, I was in complete denial about what was to come. So a few months in of treatment, it might have been 4 months in, maybe 5, she actually had a stroke, her first stroke. Luckily, my sister was over from Perth when it happened and was able to take her to hospital. And from hospital, actually in hospital, she started recovering quite well for someone who'd had a stroke. But she was getting movement completely back in the side that was affected. She was able to start walking again on the side that, she was affected on one of the sides, and she was actually getting a lot better. So they moved her to the palliative care home, which was a bit down the road from the hospital. And there she started doing really well. She was improving beyond what anyone really thought. And they actually started talking about letting my mum do palliative care from home for the remainder of the life that she had. And so we went and got a proper hospital-type bed that did a million and one functions. We put in ramps so she could get into our house. We moved her. She had a 2-story house. Her bedroom was upstairs, so we moved her to the downstairs bedroom. Like, everything was ready. My mum was so excited at the fact that she was going to be able to come home. And then the day before she was going to come, she had a second stroke. From this second stroke, she was in a comatose state from which she wasn't going to wake. And she was declining. Fortunately, in Australia at the time, and still, we don't have euthanasia. So even though she was dying and the doctors knew that and it wasn't going to get better, there's nothing you can do but wait. She would make noises like she was in pain. So it was very difficult for me and my sister. The doctors would say, like, don't worry, they're not actually in pain. They can't feel anything. But you kind of say, well, have you ever been dying? Like, how do you know they're not feeling anything? So my sister and I were kind of doing shifts at the time. So one of us would be with my mum at all times. And I think we're about a week to 10 days into my mum being in this state. And I got there to take over from my sister's shift to the palliative care unit. And we went into the lounge room to talk. And I just said to my sister that, I said, Mum's waiting for us to go. I just knew it. Mum had told us she didn't want to be in this type of state. So we both knew that. I said, she's not going to do this in front of us. I knew my mum so well. And I said, she's waiting to be alone. So we made the decision. This was a Thursday night. And we made the decision that on Friday, when I came in the evening to relieve my sister, that I would spend the last few hours with her. And then that would be it. I would go and we'd give Mum a night off. So the Friday came. I met my sister obviously at the hospital. My sister said her goodbyes and left. And then I just spent the last few hours just being with my mom and chatting and just telling her the things that I wanted to say. And about 11, I left. About, I think, 5 a.m. in the morning on the Saturday, we got a phone call to say my mom had passed peacefully. So I guess it was right. She was just waiting for us to go. We went back up to the hospital where my mum's body was still in the bed. I guess they let family members do that to say their goodbyes or whatever. But we had said our goodbyes the night before, and as soon as I walked in the room, I said to my sister, Mum's not here. And that was my first really deep connection with the spirit world, because there was such a profound feeling of, this is just an empty vessel in this room. My mom's not here. And I didn't need to be in that room. Like, to me, I was sitting just in a room with a body. There was really no point. So Because it was COVID time, unfortunately, we had to have a very small funeral. It was capped at like 10 people or something like that, and the rest could watch via video link. I just remember in my my speech it was such a surreal thing to be doing. And I recalled a story that when I was little, because my mum, and I do remember doing this, I had this obsession with my mum making her promise me that we would die together at the same time. And I also said, make sure we're outside when we die, because I was convinced that if you're inside, you won't be able to get to heaven because of the roof. So it was just, the funeral was a very surreal moment. I don't know if you would say it was cathartic. I think I was just in shock, and probably a lot of people that way. And as I said, it was COVID time. So the next day, that day, the afternoon of the funeral, my sister had to jump on a plane to go back to Perth before they closed their borders to anyone. So the next few months, I did as much as I could to distract myself from having to deal with or processing or feel what I needed to feel. I changed my co-parenting schedule that I'd been in place for the last 3 or so years. I moved suburbs. I moved houses. I just said I didn't want a daily reminder of what I didn't have anymore. So I just wanted to completely get away from any remnants of my life with my mum, which, looking back was not dealing with it, but also trying to outrun the problem. I got into a very toxic friendship at the time. I met someone who I thought I could help and save, I guess, but really it was another way to distract myself from what I was going through. And it got very dysfunctional during this time, but I do believe that people can only do things to you that you let them. I'm not talking about things with abuse or things like that. But there was an element where I had to take the blame, that as much as the things this person put me through during the time, I let it happen. And I really had to take responsibility for that and what was going on. And what was going on is I wasn't dealing with what was happening with me. So I was traveling a lot at the time as well, so more distraction. And I got really into using drugs, which was not something I had really been into in my life. I'm a non-drinker, non-smoker. And before this, I could probably count on 2 hands how many times I'd really done drugs. There was easily a 10-year gap in my life. I wouldn't have even touched them. But I was using them a lot. First it was just the weekends when I didn't have my daughter, and the weekend would be like Friday to Sunday. Then it went from Friday to Monday. Then it went from Thursday to Monday. And then it went from that and using during the week by myself, not even with anyone, just by myself at home. I was using cocaine to come up and to really not even come up, but just feel normal, to get myself up to a normal level, to get myself to be able to go to work, to get myself to be able to go out with people, to get myself to go to dinner. And then I'd use downers to come down, check out, not think about things, escape. I was also got back into a cycle of binging and purging, which is something I had dealt previous in my life, but that came back up for me. So if it wasn't the drugs and I was needing to get out of my head, it was binging and purging, and I was kind of trapped in this cycle. And I would go through stages where I would realize it was getting a bit too much. So I'd clean up my act for 6 weeks or whatever it was. And the people around me were like, oh, okay, like she's okay. Like she must be doing better, or was like, it's over, or whatever they thought. And then I kind of go back into it. But then I'd always pull myself out for a break or something just when probably people were going to actually step in. And this happened because at the time that I had no self-worth or self-love. And I was believing that this wasn't meant to be my life. And I don't know if people can relate to that, but when you're walking around, especially when I was just driving my car, dropping my daughter to school, I would think, this is not meant to be my life. Like my life is meant to be with my mum here. My life is meant to be with my mum witnessing this. My mum is meant to be here witnessing that. I'm meant to be going on walks with her. I was not accepting that this was my life. I felt like I was living in someone else's life. But it was not an easy time, but I knew I was having moments of I didn't want this to continue, but it's very hard to pull yourself out of that. At the time, I wasn't a great parent. I was able to luckily keep a job down, my business at least. Maybe if I was employed by someone else, I probably wouldn't have been able to keep it down. But parenting-wise, I could barely look after myself, let alone a child. I didn't have my daughter as much during this phase. She was more with her dad, thank God. But it's taken me a while to forgive myself for the absent parent that I was, and not just absent as in not seeing her, absent in that when she was here, I wasn't present and I wasn't connecting with her. Anyone who has used, even if it's an off day, so you're not actually using anything, you're still not in great shape. Like if you've been using more days than not, even on the days you're not using, you're not in great shape. Your energy's not there. And I was finding it really hard because my daughter was a splitting image of my mother. She looks like her. Their personalities are the same. When we used to go out together, people would actually think my mom was her mom because they looked exactly the same. And it was a daily reminder, and I couldn't deal with it at the time. So I really pushed that connection with my daughter away for that time, and it's a really hard thing to accept. Of course, it's something that I've rebuilt now and we are stronger than ever, but it's something that I will have to look back that I did miss out a chunk of my daughter's childhood. So I did finally start dealing with things. I just got to the point where I couldn't go on anymore. I'd been in hospital that year. I'd lost a lot of weight. I wasn't going to be able to continue on much longer. So I got clean. And I started seeing my therapist more. I started implementing, I didn't get clean straight away, obviously, but I started being more implicating a practice my therapist told me about, which was awareness while I abuse, which means I might still be using, I might still be binging and purging, but to be aware that I was doing it. And then from that, I could move on to when the feeling comes and when I'm about to want to do one of those activities, or being aware of that feeling. And then from that feeling, it's, okay, what am I feeling? What am I trying not to feel from this activity? So it was steps and to get me that way, but I got there and through a lot more therapy, and I started dealing with things. And one of the beliefs I had was I should be over this by now. And I was really hard on myself. I should be over this. Why am I so affected by this? Like, people go through much worse things than this. And I really had to learn to clean out my thoughts. And I've said this in prior episodes with, when you're having sex and, the thoughts of like, oh, I'm just not into this come in. And I say, you've got to tell those thoughts to fuck off. It was the same thing. I had to choose my thoughts and I had to tell those thoughts to fuck off. And I had to replace them with something else. And if I couldn't replace them with anything positive, then they just needed to fuck off. I started seeing an acupuncturist as well, especially to help my body coming off all the drugs I had been doing, and the binging and purging takes a toll on your body. And after my intake with her, because she was quite spiritual as well, she said I was really struggling with the transition from the physical to the spiritual with my mother. And she was completely right. That's where I was stuck. I just missed my mum so much. So as I said, I was doing more and more therapy with my therapist, who I've seen for the last 9 years. She's a godsend. She's very spiritual as well. I feel very safe with her. And she suggested doing a psilocybin journey. So that's with mushrooms. So you macrodose, you take a large quantity, and then you go into a journey. And this journey for me was life-changing. I did it at a point where I had been clean for a while and I was working on things already. My therapist said I would never have done this unless you were ready for it. And so you had to do the work prior. And in that journey, I really literally saw the transition of my mum going from the physical to the spiritual world. I joined her in the spiritual world during that time, and I realized that my mom is still here. She lives inside of me, and she lives inside of my daughter. She lives inside of my sister, but very strongly I feel her live inside of me now. And I realized that she still is here. It's just our relationship changed form, really. So that was really, I can't tell you, like literally after that journey, I felt that, and I still feel that. I feel my mom with me. And I started meditating every day. I started journaling. I've always been a person who really manifests, but I became much more, intentful or purposeful with it, as in an proactive thing. I was always good at picturing what I want and where I want to go, but this was getting a bit more purposeful about what I wanted to be feeling, what state I wanted to be in, what energy I wanted to be in. So being a bit more purposeful about myself and my being. So things got a lot better after that journey. I mean, things were getting better prior to it, obviously, but I had to do the work, and I still do the work. I really think that the universe guides you into where you need to go, as long as you don't fight it and you go with it. You will end up where you're meant to be. We just had the 3-year anniversary of my mom's passing. And for some reason, because I'm in such a better place with my mom and my relationship with her and my spirituality, I didn't think that that day of her passing would be anything for me, which looking back, I don't know why I thought that. And the day came and I felt emotions start to rise up into me, and I just tried to shove them down. I didn't want to deal with that. No, I'm fine. Until it ended up in a massive fight, with my husband, and I completely broke down. And I guess, I went back to my therapist and told her, and she said, well, that's grief. Grief's not ending. It's the circle of grief. And I realized that while I might be in an extremely good place with where things are right now, I will still need to grieve, and I still need to prepare myself for the day of her passing or her birthday or Mother's Day. You will need to prepare yourself to grieve. And that doesn't mean that you're not in a good place with it. It's just part of the circle of grief. So I did another journey only like 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago. And it wasn't really, that journey's intention wasn't really about my mom, because obviously I had done a lot of work on it now, but it was more about myself and where I am currently in my life. But obviously things with my mom and my life came through that. And one of the things that came really through strongly finally was my life is exactly where it's meant to be. I'm not living someone else's life. I'm living my life. It took me a really long time to love myself for who and what I am. And my journey was meant to be this journey in this life. And as hard as this is to probably, not for me to say, but some people might find it difficult to hear, but my mum was meant to die when she did, because this was meant to be my trauma, this was meant to be my growth, and this was meant to be my triumph in this life. And I wouldn't be again who I was without what I went through. And I also had the most incredible woman to guide me and empower me in this life. And we spent so much time together, and that at points, I used to warn people like, me and my mum are very close. And I remember my now husband said, when I told him this, he's like, oh, you wouldn't guess since you bought a house opposite hers. But I know it was because we had reduced time together on this planet. So we crammed it all in. So I don't regret all the time, or I'm in the fortunate position to not have to look back and think, I wish I spent more time with her, because we had so much time together and we were so close during that time. So I'm very blessed for the relationship I had with her, even though I thought at one point I was robbed. And I'm in a place where, I really feel that all that is good in me really came from her. And now I am so many things. I am, a wife. I'm a daughter still. I'm a mother. I'm a dominatrix. I'm a healer. I'm a friend. I own a business. There's so many facets to me. And I would not be all those things without what my journey has been. So I really have to be thankful for my lessons and my journey. I really learnt how strong and powerful energy is. I learned how to connect with my spiritual self and the spiritual world on a much, much deeper level. And I found a strength in me so deep that I didn't know it was there. And I know that this is just the beginning. I know there's so much more to come. I know my purpose. I love what I get to do every day. I love who I'm becoming. And I love how I face challenges. One of the last things I said to my mom was, ci vediamo, which means in Italian, I'll be seeing you again. Because I believe I've circled lives with my mom. We've been circling lives together, but this one with her as my mom and me as the daughter, I think will be pretty hard to top. But I really look forward to it. So in the meantime, she lives inside of my heart, but I know I'll be seeing her again. So thanks for sticking with me. And as always, stay kinky.